Hi everyone, welcome back to CodeSfera. In this course, we are building a Telegram weather bot using Node.Js. But before we start coding, we need to set up our development environment. Today, we will install an IDE, Git, GitHub, as well as Node.js. Let's get started. First of all, we have to choose and install our preferred IDE. Um, an IDE is a tool where we write and test our code. Today we will install two options. One of them is Visual Studio Code, which you can see now in my screen, and another one is Cursor AI. To install Visual Studio Code, you will have to open a website code.visualstudio.com, and on the right top hand side you can see a download button. Once you will navigate to this page, you will be able to select a preferred OS, either it's Windows, Mac OS, or maybe Linux, and then you will have to install by following on the screen instructions. Once you open your Visual Studio Code, you have to install some of the extensions. So basically, extensions are something like a plugin which you can add on top of your Visual Studio Code. It actually helps you with a lot of different things. Maybe I can give you some of the examples. For example, Plant UML, I'm using it to build some architectural diagrams by using code. So suppose, for example, here you can see a customer and clear how the checkout process is implemented. It actually supports zoom and scroll, multi-page view, etc., etc. This is only one of the examples, but I'm pretty sure a lot of developers use Prettier as a code formatter with the slint, which helps developers to keep the code structure as well as the code formatting uh, same for the whole team. Similarly, you can also install so-called Cursor AI. So basically, Cursor AI is something which was developed by enthusiast team, and it's been already trusted by engineers in top of the companies like OpenAI, Shopify, Perplexity, Vercel, etc., etc. The good thing about Cursor AI is that it actually, maybe I can show you here, it actually, firstly, it supports all of the extensions from Visual Studio Code, and basically you can just synchronize your account with Cursor AI. So for example, here you can see I do have every extensions which I had in Visual Studio Code. Secondly, there are some settings which I want to show you here. Firstly, I have to use the pro account, but right now I'm using trial, but feel free to create your account and buy a subscription. After that, it will let you to select what kind of models do you want to support. I would highly recommend to use Cloud 3.7, which is quite powerful and one of the strongest LLM models in the world right now, as of March 2025. I'm also using GPT-4o for the reasoning models. O1 for reasoning model as well as GPT-4o. And I also would like to use DeepSeek. So here you can also input your OpenAI API keys or Anthropic API keys, Google, Azure, and it will help you to write your code as fast as possible. There are some rules as well which you can write down. For example, here as an example, um, developer can say that always output answers in Portuguese or in Chinese or in any other preferred language, and in that case every single sentence will be written in Portuguese. But on top of that, you can also specify what language do you want to support. Maybe you want to restrict the output to be only in JavaScript, maybe only supported by ES6 or ES5, etc., etc. It also supports MCP servers, which I'll show you and go through in a different playlist about AI. Um, but one more thing which I really want to highlight is it actually has a thing called code-based indexing, meaning that when you will have your project set up, you will have to index your code base, meaning that all of your code will be indexed within the cursor so that cursor will understand what exactly your code is about. And there is also one more thing which is called YOLO mode, um, which I don't really recommend to turn on if you are a new joiner. If you are newbie, please don't use YOLO mode because essentially it may um, change your code quite a lot. But anyways, this is the way how you can install your IDE. Basically, IDE is a place where you can run your code. So for example, here I want to open um, I open I want to open my workspace, and then here for example I can create I already created a GS file, hello.js, and then so on the left hand side I'll be able to see all of my files within my workspace. I can also see the outline, timeline, and sonar cube. These are some of the extensions which I normally use in my daily life. Um, in the bottom side, I normally use only terminal, but I also have comments, ports, debug console, etc. etc. So in the terminal right now, I want to use bash, so I can open it. And then, for example, if I want to run this particular file using Node.js, what I can do is node space and then my file, which is hello.js. Once I run it, I'll be able to see my log, which is written in the console, which is written in my code. Now, in the middle, of course, I do have my code written, and on the right hand side is something what cursor has. So basically, it's a chat. It's actually similar as your chat GPT. Here, for example, you can change the mode. Normally, I use agent mode, and then you can also select your model which you want to use. I highly recommend to use auto select, but in some of the cases, I also use specify cloud 3.7 sonnet model. So for example, here I can ask help me to write more logs to see to test out my Node.js app. Once I ask my model, it will go through my code, and essentially it will first read it, and then it will enhance my file by various types of logging techniques commonly used in Node.js applications. So once it's applied, I can either accept it or revert the file, meaning that I can also reject it. Suppose I want to accept the file, and then cursor will also suggest me to run it within the chat, but I actually personally want to run it by myself. So once I run it, I'll be able to see my new logs, meaning that I still have my hello world, and then I have different types of logs. Here, for example, I use info, warning, and error. And then I also can log my JSON objects, which is here, as well as I can also log my current time. I can also log tabular format, and I can also group some informations together. And I can also use timeout, debug mode to see different types of logs. So basically, this is it about different types of IDE. Now the next step will be about installing Git firstly, and then setting up GitHub repository. But firstly, I would highly recommend to go to this page git-scm.com, downloads, and then you'll be able to select your OS. In my case, it's macOS, and then again you will have to go through the installation process. But in the nutshell, what is actually a Git? Git is a version control system that helps us track changes in our code. While GitHub is an online platform where we can store and collaborate on code projects. So again, I would highly recommend to open this website and go through the installation process. Once you install your GitHub, you can verify that it's working by running git 2 dashes and then version. So for example, here I do have a version number 2.39.5. I can also run git help to see what other commands it supports. But please do understand that this is only a git. It has nothing related to GitHub or Bitbucket or any other versions. Now, for our project, I would like to go through the setting up our repository. So I want to use GitHub because GitHub supports Copilot, as well as GitHub is developed and maintained by Microsoft, which is essentially um, one of the mostly supported platform in the world. So here you have to open repository. Basically, repository is something like a folder where your workspace will be located. So I will have to click new repository, and then I have to select my repository name. In our case, as we are building Telegram bot, it will be called as weather telegram bot Node.Js. And then description, I can write it, but I can also keep it as optional. In my case, I want to write a short description. Backend for my Node.js microservice to support Telegram bot. Of course, I can also select whether this repository should be a private one or a public one. In my case, I want to keep it as public because I want to share my code with you. And then GitHub also can create README file as well as git ignore file for me. In my case, I want to have git ignore template, and as a template, I want to use Node because we are writing in the Node.js. Once I click create repository, GitHub will create for me. Now, please understand that this is a repository. As I mentioned, it's basically a folder, which we now have to synchronize with our local machine. To do so, we have to firstly copy the URL. And then if we go back to our IDE, we have to now, in the coding terminology, we call it clone, meaning that we have to clone the repository. Again, if we run git help, we can see that it has command called clone, which is clone repository into a new directory. Exactly what we need. How to use it? We have to write git and then clone as a command, and then we have to specify the URL. But if we just write git clone, we will get an error saying that you must specify a repository to clone. Usage, git clone, and then some options which we can provide, and then the repo link. In our case, we will have to have git clone and then the link, which I'm gonna pass here. Once I'm passing it, basically it's clone my file, and as you remember, we only have git ignore as the only file within our repository, and Git actually created it for us because we have specified that we are gonna use Node.js. Now, let me delete these files. Now, the next step will be to set up Node.js into our machine, to our computer. Firstly, again, we have to install Node.js itself. How we do it? We just have to open Node.js website, and then you'll be able to see a button download Node.js LTS. LTS is long-term support, meaning that it's the most updated version, stable version of Node.js. Once you install it, you will be able to again run it within your terminal. Because I already have pre-installed it in my computer, I'm not gonna show you how to do it, but it's pretty straightforward. The idea is once you install it, you'll be able to run Node, and then similarly you can verify by using version command. So here, for example, I'm using version 20.5.1, and I can also ask what kind of commands it actually supports. And because Node and essentially Node.Js is a big, massive, it's actually a framework under JavaScript programming language. It actually supports different kinds of commands. Another thing is Node.js is actually supports npm. npm is a package management system. In a nutshell, npm is a library for you to install different packages, different libraries which were built by developers. Imagine that, for example, if you are front-end developer, which of course we will go through in the next couple of sessions, lessons. Suppose I want to have, I don't know, maybe carousel in my or maybe image previewer. What I can do is I can just search for it, image preview, and then maybe React. Let's specify that we're gonna use React. Once I search it, I'll be able to see different types of packages. For example, this one. Let's pick a random one, and this is firstly, it specifies how can I install the package to my computer, to my workspace. Secondly, it also shows, because this library is essentially an open source file, it also shows me where the code is located, and I can actually be one of the maintainer of this code. Secondly, it also supports weekly downloads, meaning that we can track whether this library is supported by the community. I can also see different types of versions, pull request, total files, last published time, etc. etc. In the middle, we can also see the README file on how we can use this package, this library. And these are the different properties which we can use. This is essentially one of the examples how we can use it. And some of the developers also has button to have a demo. For example, this developer prepared a demo, and basically here this is how this package works. It's actually, as I mentioned, a previewer, meaning that if we click into an image, we'll be able to see a preview of that image. It's very helpful because as a developer, you don't want to show the full size image in your website because it will essentially lower your performance of your website, of your front-end application. Instead, you have to have thumbnail, meaning that that's a lighter version of your image, and then only if user is interested in the image, he or she can select that image and see the exact source of the image. But again, this is just an example. npm, as I mentioned, is essentially a library to install different types of packages. In our example, we will use Telegraf. Telegraf is a framework for Telegram bots. It's one of the most popular one. As you can see here, it's weekly downloads 80, almost 90K per week. And it's been published a year ago. It also has pretty structured documentation, and but of course we will go through it in the next session. Please stay tuned and let me know if you have any questions. Please don't forget to subscribe into our YouTube channel and comment, like, and see you next session. Bye.